admirer of my father, who was a mask maker. He became a mask maker uh, probably quite by chance. He had worked for a mannequin manufacturer in Chicago and knew all the techniques of molding. And he had seen some masks that people had done in paper mache and in very thick casted materials. And about 1938, 1939, he decided that the mask could be made out of a flexible slip cast latex rubber, and did some sculptures and some experiments with them, because he felt that a mask should have a piece that fit very tightly over the face, and then an outer core which depicted the character, and that air pressure would hold the character in its shape. But later he found that the latex, if cast thick enough, would hold its own shape and depict a character. And in 1939, he started to make latex masks, which were, we believe, the first latex masks created.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Welcome back to Collection Wars. Like always, this is Gabe.
Hey, Michael here. How's it going, everybody?
Great. And this is a very exciting show, guys. And I'm sure you guys are going to love our guest today. Michael, you have some words?
Yeah, I'll tell you, all of our shows are great. All of the guests that we have on are great. But this one touches my heart very deep. And to have this renowned gentleman, Don Post, is just an exciting thing. And he's very well known in the industry of masks and whatnot. And for him to take time, to come on our show is just very much appreciated. So excited. Yeah. I'm excited.
I'm excited as well. There's just so much history. There's so much cool stuff that Don Post has just been a part of. And
yeah, look behind me.
No, I'm geeking out already, and even in the short conversations that we've had with them, Don is just such an awesome guy, and I'm so excited to have him.
Yeah, without further ado, let's bring him on, buddy.
Bring him on.
Okay.
Hi.
Oh, hey, Don. I'm gonna put you on the spot here and put you on the big screen here. Hey, Don.
What's up, buddy?
Yeah.
How are you? Thank you so much for joining us, Don. We really appreciate you taking the time and hanging out with us for a little bit.
Well, anytime. I like to reminisce once in a while.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Don, I'll tell you what, it's, I'll never forget the first time I met you in the 90s. I was flying in a few times to your studio and seeing, of course, all the crazy things that were in the works, whether it was masks. At that particular time, you were working on a lot of the Star Wars license masks, as well as life-size characters. And but if you don't mind, if you could kind of bring our audience and let's take them back to kind of where it all started. Can you do that?
Sure. Just ask me what you want to.
Okay. Well, where did it start? So you started with your dad, correct? Your dad was in the mask business.
Well, my dad, he had artistic ability, but his grandfather, my great grandfather, Robert Hunter, was a sculptor and he did a lot of frescoes, and he did a lot of stonework back in the 1800s. In fact, he worked at Stanford University when they were building that. And he worked there maybe 20, 30 years.
Wow.
They were originally building that. And some of my cousins say that back in Connecticut, there's in post offices, there's frescoes that he had done. So he had artistic ability. And his daughter, my grandmother, she really wasn't a big fan of somebody being an artist, and she wanted him to be a white collar person.
Yeah.
So he always was encouraged to do that, but really, where he fit better was doing things that were artistic. And so um, he originally got in, he uh, worked for Retail Credit Association, a job that one of his high school buddies helped him get, a guy named Elliot Ness. Who,
I
Elliot
know
Ness,
that guy. Gabe, I know you know that guy.
he
Yeah.
was a crime fighter.
Mhm.
And so Elliot Ness got him this job. They both worked for Retail Credit. And then later on, uh, he sold insurance. Well, that went bust because when the stock market crashed in the late 20s, he everything just fell out
Mm.
for him. So he went through maybe 30 jobs in the 30s because you'd get a job and it wouldn't last very long. And, he was young enough that he really wasn't established. So um, the last job he got was probably 1937-38. He worked for a company called Silvestri's. And Silvestri was a mannequin manufacturer, and they had locations. The Silvestri brothers, had different locations, one in Los Angeles, one in Chicago, which was where he was, and one in Texas, I believe. And so he worked for them, and he learned a little bit about mold making and things like that. And he started experimenting with making a latex mask. And finally, he came up with a way that was very simple to make a latex mask by slip casting a clay filled latex into a plaster mold. Now, that kind of process, if you think about it, is thousands and thousands of years old. It was used to make little pottery back 3,000 years ago.
Hmm.
And so uh, he learned how to do all that and experimented, made some latex masks, and nobody had ever seen anything like that before. And the first characters he made were political figures of the 30s, like Stalin, Hitler, Gandhi, um, Chamberlain, uh, and others, FDR, things like that. And they were very popular, and they were used originally in a stage act in New York, where they had all these political figures sitting around a dinner table and, and speaking kind of gibberish. And Hitler was eating off everybody else's plate, for instance. And they each had characteristics that were consistent with their world behavior. So then later on, people wanted to buy them. He started selling them to people, and he probably had an office that was probably about the size of the room I'm in now.
Wow.
And he made these masks, and it was the end of the Depression, and all of a sudden he had some money and some income, and so he started doing that. And then when World War II broke out, all the supplies were no longer available to people. So he he had to go to work making wings for P-52 aircraft at the Pullman Railroad Works, which they were making planes at the time for the war. And so he did that during the war, and then after the war, he tried another venture. He was trying to make a golf cart, and somebody came out with the one before they did, he and his partner at the time. So then he went back to doing sculpture and making the masks. And in 1947, in September of 47, moved out to the Los Angeles area. And he was discovered then by the movie industry. So he did a lot of B films and, things like Body Snatchers. He did all the original characters for Body Snatchers. And I Was a Teenage Werewolf with Michael Landon. And The Tree from Hell, It Came, or something like that. And many other, Space Master X7 or something like that.
Yeah.
And so he made all those props for those movies. And today when they make props for movies like that, you're talking about millions of dollars. And when you made props for movies in the 50s, you're talking about hundreds or maybe even $1,500.
Yeah.
Or something like that for stuff for the Body Snatchers.
Yeah.
So he did a lot of work for the studios as a freelancer, because at the time, if you were a makeup artist or a prop maker, you didn't have the skills to create a lot of these things. So he was their go-to person, and people would go to him. He'd make the stuff. They'd take credit for it. And he'd take the money. So that was Don Post Studios in the 50s, along with making masks. And the studio was pretty small, so there wasn't much made of it. But he made some good things, and people appreciated at retail the quality of the things he made. But he never, in the 50s or even the early 60s, never did a lot of Hollywood. And that's how Don Post Studios got started.
Wow.
That's amazing. And I didn't know that he worked on those old, 1950s B movie. I love those B movies, like the Ed Wood movies, and like I love those.
Right. Yeah.
Those are,
It's safe to say that he's the one who pretty much created the latex mask, who started that. Is that correct?
That's what we claim.
Yeah.
We claim they were never seen before that.
Yeah.
And really where they started to take off at retail is he was at a UCLA Notre Dame football game in Valparaiso, Indiana. And he was in front of the crowd with some of these masks, like Hitler, leading cheers in front of the UCLA crowd. So,
oh geez, that's like, so we actually have like a picture on it. So is this one of his original kind of business cards, or like the original logo?
well, back in that was not really a logo. That was just kind of a promotional thing. There was a partner that he had. There was this young guy who was maybe 4 or 5 years older than me, named Vern Langdon, who got involved in the business, and his mother had money, and she bought half the company for him. And he was involved, and they started, he wanted to make these Universal monster characters. And and he wanted them just a certain way. And my dad couldn't please him, couldn't make it exactly like, the movie. Well, there was this woman actually who came out to Hollywood who worked for him in Chicago named Pat Newman. So they got Pat Newman to come in, and Pat Newman sculpted all these characters. And she had a very finite style of sculpture where she would make things that were, how can I say it, very precise. Because if you think of it, I mean, the difference between a person, the length of a person's nose and how different they look to each one of us.
Mm-hmm.
It's, what is it? It's like an eighth of an inch here and there.
Yeah.
But had just a very subtle style, and she did the Universal horror movies characters,
Mm-hmm.
and she did them for Vern and Don Post Studios, and then and you know, I wish I could remember now this photo you've got of these characters. The artist who did that also did cartoons for some small newspaper in LA, and he was a pretty noted artist. I wish I could remember what his name was. But anyway, so Vern got involved and he created all these masks. And somewhere along the line, after all these things were created and everything, he lost interest in it. So all this gold mine of art was there, and nobody was willing to. My dad at the time, he was maybe let's see, maybe 64 years old, and he didn't have the energy to really do any kind of production or anything. And I was at the time, I was about 22, almost 23, and I got involved in the company. And I started producing the masks because we had orders for them, and there wasn't anybody to fulfill them. And at the time, this Vern Langdon, he was off working at Universal Studios on Planet of the Apes. So I produced masks during the summer. The volume of the company was very small, and I started producing them and getting them made and getting them delivered. And a customer, for instance, like Disney, they don't know how many of those to order unless they have enough in stock and they can see how many sales they're getting. So when I started producing them, retailers started to realize that how popular they were, and they started making more. Also, I think one of the big things that promoted Don Post Studios was Famous Monsters magazine. The first cover of Famous Monsters magazine had a Don Post Frankenstein mask on it. And then there were the Universal Monster characters, which were in the back, always on the back page of the catalog, which added, I mean, it added a lot of flair to the magazine and was probably more attractive as a page than it was for the sales that Universal or that Captain Company, who was part of the Famous Monsters magazine, and it was more than more as an attraction than it was for sales for them, because they really never did that many kinds of sales. Now that's me there. See it with the bald cap? That's me, and I'm maybe 13 or 14 years old there. So you take a look at this face, and that's what I looked like. I was probably 18, at that, and I was wearing a bald cap, and that bald cap was put on by John Chambers, who was the Planet of the Apes Oscar-winning makeup artist.
Wow, that's so
And
cool.
he put that bald cap on me for this photo. And it's not the bald cap that we're selling, really, but it's a real professional bald cap, as you can see.
No.
So Don, when you started, when you kind of picked up and took over the reins from your dad, were you already a knowledgeable sculptor, or just through the years in and out?
You know, I'll tell you what. How that happened is I got out of the military. I was in the military 66, 67, and actually on the 4th of July of 1968, I was off my active duty status in the Coast Guard. And I was talking to my dad, and John Chambers, he said, well, come on down and we'll get you in an apprentice program as a makeup artist. And so I said to my dad, I said, that's a really nice thing, but I think there's a lot of potential in the masks that you have. And, I think there's a lot of money in it. So my dad says to this 23-year-old, well, you can do anything you want. So I was given free reign over at Downpost Studios at 23 years old. And I busted my butt and made masks. And at the time, there was one full-time employee and myself, one part-time employee. And that was all that Downpost Studios was.
Wow.
And by the end of 1968, that year, the total sales for Downpost Studios were $38,000.
Wow.
Now, $38,000, I mean, today that might be like $150,000.
Right.
But I negotiated with my dad, talked myself up to over $80 a week.
Taking it home, huh?
Yeah. So, I did that, and my dad had another company called Studio Plastics, was in the same small building. We had maybe, I would say, 1,500 square feet of space, and part of it was taken up by a 4-foot by 8-foot vacuum form machine, and which I would run, and we would run off the studio. The motion picture studios had a conflict and the conflict was, who's going to run a vacuum form machine? And the sculptors union wanted to run it because they were doing sculpture that they were then vacuum forming into shapes like roofs and different things, and automobiles, like did the automobile bodies for the Great Race out of plastic, and there was a movie called Irma la Douce, and they did they had a perspective set where as you went down the street, everything got smaller. So there were several different kinds of cars they wanted, several different sizes. And what they do is they have this car, the side of it, and on a stick, they run it across the streets in the background to make it look like there was traffic.
Yeah.
And there was lots of little things, but also there was sides of beef. And some of the sides of beef, I mean, this is like a full. I remember my dad went down and with Studio Plastics, and they took a mold off of the side of beef. Bought the side of beef right there on the dock of this meat place. Made a plaster mold off of it, and they cut up the side of beef and took it home and ate it. So, but then they would vacuum form the sides of beef, put the front half, bond them together, and then they'd be painted to look like a side of beef. And there was one big, like 250-pound side of beef hanging in the shop, and some meat inspector comes in and says, "You can't have that meat."
He thought it was a real deal.
Huh? So my dad goes up to it and goes, "Bonk, bonk," it's plastic.
So that's funny. So fast forward, Don, you're working in the studio. You guys are really starting to step it up and create these masks and the universal masks and whatnot. Also, you were doing a lot of stuff for the mask for like Planet of the Apes, correct?
Well, yeah, and what happened is John Chambers again, he was an Oscar winner with Planet of the Apes. And there was a company that was going to get a license. They didn't license Planet of the Apes right away, but this company called Ben Cooper in Chicago, and they made the little kids' costumes where it was printed plastic and, with a picture of the character.
Yeah.
Had a mask with it.
I remember those.
Yeah.
I remember those.
This whole license for that to them. John Chambers went down and talked to this guy named Bernie Barron, who was doing the licensing at the time, and he said, he says, you're really missing the boat, because this Don Post, they make some really quality masks. And he says, personally, he says, I'd like to see some masks which really show the character, Universal Monster characters were. And because people would walk in the shop and they'd see us making these masks, and they'd say, well, are these for a movie? No, they're a retail item, but made with the same techniques and processes that you would make them for movies. So we got the license for Planet of the Apes, did really well with it. And a couple years later, the licensing department of Fox called and said, we've got this new movie coming out. It's called Star Wars. And here's some pictures of the characters, Stormtrooper, Darth Vader, and Yoda and everything. And I looked at that and I said, that's really good. And at the time I was saying, why, this villain character here, Darth Vader, why, I'll bet you we could sell as many of those as Frankenstein. So I was so excited, and I said to myself, now calm down. It's Friday, so wait till Monday before you call them back and say that you want to do the license. And so I did. And I called Mark Pevers, who was doing the licensing at the time. He did the original licensing for Star Wars. And I said, yeah, well, I'd like to do those as a mask. I think they're really nice. Okay. So at the time, today, if you go to get a Star Wars license, you're talking about at least $250,000.
Oh, it's more than that. Yeah.
I'm sure. And also, not only are you talking about that kind of money, but you have to produce you get the $250,000 up front. So you're talking about producing millions of dollars worth of merchandise. And they also said, and 5% royalty.
Jeez.
Which at the time, that was fairly standard. But, I mean, compared to today, the last time I saw licensing, they were talking 18%. And if you think of it, if a company has a target to make a 20% margin on their product, and all of a sudden they have to also pay 18 of that percent as license, it's an incredible amount of money. But at the time, so I got this license for these characters. When we did what we could do with it. I originally we made the Darth Vader as it was a vinyl piece, and the Stormtrooper is a vinyl piece, and I kept calling all of my customers who were jobbers. And what a jobber does is he buys the merchandise and then he distributes it to small little stores. That's what the Halloween market was like at that time, even in the late 80s. So I get the molds ready to do that and everything, and we're pretty much ready to go. And all of a sudden, Star Wars opens. And I don't think, compared to anything that had been done in the past, it set a new precedent. There was nothing like it. I mean, there was a frenzy. And I went from trying to convince my customers to buy these Star Wars masks. They'd say, Star what? Star Wars. Well, what's it about? I said, well, it's a science fiction movie staged in outer space. And they said, science fiction doesn't sell. And nobody was interested.
And let me cut you off. Let me just ask you real quick. So at that time on the Star Wars, and that, because it was probably 76, 77, well, 77 when it was released. So had you already started making the Star Trek? Because Star Trek was in the late 60s into the 70s. So had you already started doing anything with Star Trek at all?
We had made Star Trek stuff.
You did?
We had made that. But we're making, this phenomena.
Yeah.
I mean, it was nothing like, I had a small business yet. I mean, at the time, I probably had 20 employees working for me at that time. And this movie came out. And I had 3 phone lines. That's it. And those phones rang all day long.
Wow.
I'd come in at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the 3 lines were blinking.
That's exciting.
And, and people would call, and you'd answer the phone and they'd say, my husband is dying, and his last request is to have a Darth Vader mask. Who knows whether that's true or not?
Yeah. You remember that, though, huh?
A Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And Playboy magazine wanted a Darth Vader mask. I said, well, what do you want it for? Well, what they wanted to do is put a nude woman at Darth Vader's feet with a whip in his hand.
Whoa.
And I said, no, I'm not going to give you a Darth Vader mask, because they couldn't get anywhere. Nobody could get them. We couldn't make them fast enough.
Yeah.
And what year was that, Don? What year was that?
So that was the year the movie came out.
Okay.
And it was, so we had, from the time the movie came out was when things exploded. And I made 7,000 Darth Vader masks that year at $20 a piece. That's pretty good. And well, it's not pretty good. It was.
So that was your profit or your cost to build?
If I would have had an injection mold, could have made, 150,000, 200,000 of them, sold out of them.
Yeah.
What a shame.
Yeah.
I mean, the next year, in '78, we sold 70,000 Darth Vader.
Wow. And those are all being done by hand, or you had that machine, but
Well,
that's just
an injection mold. But
gotcha.
Basically, the way that the masks were made, like the Darth Vader, and we always made the Stormtrooper this way. Those were made. They were vinyl, and they were slip cast. And what that is that you heat up the mold, you fill it up with vinyl, liquid vinyl material. You pour out the residue, it forms a shell. And that's the way we make the mask. Why did we do it that way? Would have loved to have an injection mold.
It's only money, right?
But I didn't have that kind of money.
Yeah.
As you know, I mean, even today, if somebody gets a Star Wars license to make some kind of unique item, they can go out of business before they.
And it happens quite a bit, Don. We talked about that a little bit.
Well, that's because, those people are so taken by the item and not considering what the costs are.
Right.
So the second year with the Darth Vader, I realized, hey, we got to make an injection mold for Darth Vader, which we did. We made an injection mold, and I probably didn't go to the right person. Got a good price. That injection mold really wasn't that good a mold, but that's what we used to make the character. And also, originally, another interesting thing is the Darth Vader was really impossible. And some senator in the U.S. decided that they wanted to test the eye things to see whether they would withstand the same test that your glasses have to pass. What they do is they drop a steel ball from height onto a lens to see whether it'll break. Well, I was using plastic for the eyes that was way above standard. So, of course, it passed. But basically, what they were trying to do is take Star Wars and make an issue of it and make a name for themselves. Well, it didn't work.
No.
Because fortunately, the materials I was using for the eyes was way far and above. And I was lucky with that too, because at the time you could buy plastics in colors. These days you can't. If you want to buy, you have to buy tons of plastic to get it colored in let's say in a green or something like that, or a gray in order to make a lens. You'd have to buy tons of it if you were vacuum forming it. And at the time, I could just go and buy it off the shelf. So I was really fortunate to be able to buy that material off the shelf.
Nice.
So before we get into
yeah,
go ahead. Okay, go ahead, Gabe.
No, so I wanted to show you a couple of pictures because you're already starting to kind of get into the process of making some of these masks. But before that, I want to just go through a couple of the little catalog pictures that we have, just so you could kind of tell us what we're looking at. So this first catalog, now this is the original offering, right, of the 4 original masks?
Yeah. Now, actually, I got to tell you, the Darth Vader, we had an original helmet, and we copied it we made it smaller so it fit, you know, a more average person.
Now,
And
so just let me start. So Lucasfilm let you borrow one of the original helmets to do it?
yeah, because we kind of it was a very small community at the time.
Yeah.
And he said I don't know why they called us, but they said, we're looking for somebody to go around and be Darth Vader. And we knew this guy. His name was Kermit Eller. Now I believe he goes by the name of Bryce Eller. But Kermit was a really big guy, and he got to be Darth Vader, and he went all around the country as Darth Vader,
Promoting.
in the original costume. So we had access to the costume because Kermit Eller had it. And he was traveling all over the country with it. So, and also we had access to it before that, so we could get the shapes right, doing the Darth Vader, and so
that's really cool because that means some of these original helmets. I mean, you based it off the real screen use piece, and that's, I mean, I know for collectors that's a big deal.
And then he shrunk it down.
Yeah.
we did, except the original Darth Vader helmet, when they were making it, people had no reverence when they were making the first movie. So all these props and everything, they were made by a quality people. But the Darth Vader helmet, when they cast the fiberglass for the original helmets, they cast it too hot and they warped.
Yep.
And that's just the way that they work. And then in order for Darth Vader to show up, they used a Chrysler automotive paint in a gray to color some of the panels on the mask so that they would show, you could see the shapes in the movie. A lot of times people think they look at a movie and they say, well, this prop, it's supposed to look like this and etc. But those things are made so that when they're filmed, that they show up in the correct color. And so that's why they did that to Darth Vader. And there's lots of controversy about a lot of movie characters, like the shape from Halloween and everything. And
Yeah.
you want to say, oh, it's this way or that way, but it's not, because they made it a certain way so it'd show up on the screen.
Yeah.
So I know we're kind of jumping around a little bit, and we want to go back, and I'm glad Gabe brought that up to just go over a couple of those things. But before we do, just because we're talking about the Darth Vader helmet,
yeah.
Wait, and I know we'll jump back, but just because we're talking about that helmet and you're talking about the warp, you made these basic helmets back in the 70s, but much later on, you created these premium helmets. And those premium helmets, how did you get the castings to do such an accurate helmet on that one? Because I have your premium right behind me, Vader helmet, that's right out of the film, right?
Well, I think that's a
Empire version.
Yeah, I think it's an Empire version.
Gotcha.
But yeah, well, they were, when at that time, and when we did the prop replicas, we asked Lucasfilm, can we get copies out of the molds? Well, they had me pay $1,500 a piece just for a thin copy out of the mold so that we could see the shapes. So we did get copies of originals that we could, work with so that we could make them more accurately. And on that Darth Vader helmet, it's got that circle that couples the helmet to the face mask.
Yep.
And that's the way the original helmet was. So
But y'all went off of drawings though, instead of that having an actual like
no,
replica.
we had 3-dimensional things to work with.
And back then, I would think it'd be a lot harder than obviously it is today to create something like that.
Well, I mean, today, there's technology where you can scan shapes.
Yeah.
But at that time, if there was technology like that, didn't know about it.
So that's really cool. So that means the premium helmets that you created later for Empire, so those were essentially direct. You molded them from a direct cast of the original.
And I've got this friend who's a big fan, and he wanted a Darth Vader helmet so bad, and I sold him one, and it wasn't right because he wanted the one from the first movie. People are particular.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to. So this next one. So that's the next offering, right? So that's kind of the next ones that you.
At that time, we had a injection mold, but we continued like with C-3PO and some of the other ones. The volume wasn't there in order to afford a mold. Now the Stormtrooper, I would have loved to been able to make a injection mold on that, but those molds are expensive. You're talking about $75,000, and you've got to have a kind of volume that's going to justify that. And we never felt that the volume was there to justify, doing the Stormtrooper in the injection mold.
Now, Don, the Yoda mask pictured here is famously, and I remember just because growing up, watching E.T., I remember there's a scene where E.T. is kind of wobbling and he's dressed up as a costume, and there's a little kid dressed up as Yoda, and it looks, I'm pretty sure he's wearing the Don Post mask because it looks pretty much identical to that.
For that scene in the movie, of course, Spielberg had to get permission from Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
And Lucasfilm told him you have to use the Don Post mask.
Yes.
Now, also, Woody Allen used the Chewbacca in a film, and we heard from the Woody Allen people, and they said, George Lucas said we have to use a Don Post mask. Now, those are big compliments.
Absolutely.
Now, let me tell you something you may not know about the Chewbacca. Is originally we made a Chewbacca and his mouth was open, snarling a little bit, and it was a really cool character. But Lucasfilm said no, it's too threatening. We want.
It actually looks really good. The Chewie for back in the day, it's a really good look of Chewie. I think back then that's an awesome piece.
Now I want to point something out that Bill Malone did the sculpture for the Darth Vader helmet. He did Yoda, and he did C-3PO. And Bob Short, who is an Oscar winner makeup artist. I can't remember the name of the movie. I think it was a Ron Howard movie.
Willow?
No, I think it had to do with one of the things Bob Short was really known for, I believe, is doing things that were underwater.
Cocoon.
Cocoon. That's what it was.
Yep.
And so Bob Short, he did the sculpture on the Chewie, and so I just wanted to point that out because I have a lot of respect for those guys, and I was very lucky to have a lot of, including.
Hey, Gabe.
I was very lucky to have that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Working for me, and so I just wanted to point that out because it's important to me to have them recognize.
Yeah. So Don, just before we move, because I want to show all these pictures and you kind of go through them, but before I go and ask you that, was there any, like, how many times have you met George Lucas and interacted with George Lucas? Because us as fanboys, George Lucas is like.
Oh yeah, I remember one time I was at Lucasfilm and I was seeing somebody else. I was eating in the dining room, and I'm going on and pontificating and blabbing away and everything like that. George Lucas is having lunch, sitting behind me, listening to what I'm saying. And I never talked to him that time. But I've had maybe 6 or 7 conversations with George Lucas, and I think we're getting up to around 30 words.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that.
I remember the first time I met him, and I said, you made my favorite movie, American Graffiti. And he chuckled.
That's hilarious. And I mean, I'm sure that's, I'm sure he took that as a comment, because that was, besides THX 1138, I mean, that was his first major motion picture, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I don't know anything about what he's really like, because although I met him and everything, I mean, he was very close to the vest, and especially when he got. I went to a party one time where our conversation was, Don Post, long time no see. That was the conversation. And walking around the room talking to people at this party he was throwing up at the ranch. And he had his vice president over one shoulder and his lawyer over the other shoulder.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, his value is so great. And then here's this guy who he has to protect himself.
Yeah.
And I respect that he has to do that, but it's really a shame. I mean, think of it, if you had to have a lawyer standing there over your shoulder every time you spoke to somebody.
Yeah.
Sounds like Michael. Yeah, I'm gonna be hovering over your shoulder, Michael.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Hey, so Gabe, do you mind if I ask Don? We kind of get off Star Wars, because obviously Don knows we were the big Star Wars, and I can't wait to get into like how these became behind me. But can we talk a little bit about the movie Halloween, Don? Do you have a problem with that?
No, not at all.
Okay, so a lot of people do know who Michael Myers is, but most of them don't know how the mask, came about. And there was a lot of controversy whether it was a Don Post created mask. And I know you've been through a lot through the episode. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, they were looking for a mask, and originally we were making a Felix Adler clown mask, and they were thinking of using that. I believe it's that one. It was either that or Emmett Kelly. I don't think it was Emmett Kelly. I think it was Felix Adler, and we were making this Felix Adler mask, and I believe they were thinking and talking about using that mask as the shape, as the mask. And they wanted to use a Captain Kirk mask. And they went to Hollywood Magic and they tried to get it from Hollywood Magic. And Hollywood Magic didn't have them. And they came to me and they said, well, we'd like to buy some Captain Kirk masks for this movie, but we'd like the face painted white and we'd like the black hair on it rather than the kind of brownish hair that's on the Captain Kirk mask. And I said, look, I've got a couple of them, but I don't, this is during the Halloween season, ironically. And they said, but I don't really have time to pull out the molds and cast them and do that. You want it right away. And I said, what if I just spray the hair black with a lacquer paint? So that's what we did. Now, there's a lot of, I'm not saying they didn't get masks from elsewhere, but that's how it came about. So we made the masks and we cut the eyelids off them and, as per their request. And we sprayed the faces white and we did the other. And then I believe afterwards, you know, and like I was saying with in movies, they have to do certain tricks in order to make colors come out correctly. So what they did then, after we were done with them and took the sideburns off, they used a blue color to outline the lips and some other facial features so that the mask would project properly under, you know, on film and under light. And so they made some modifications to what we did. And so we did that with a couple of them. Whether they got some somewhere else, I don't know.
Did you ever did you get to see some pre-production photos before the movie actually aired, or did you were in the movie theater?
Bottom, like people coming off the street and buying some stuff. We didn't know.
Gotcha.
What film it was for, or anything. And you know, and then we saw as it was coming out, we saw, and originally, you know, we didn't make a shape mask originally when the first movie came out. It was later that we started coming out with stuff. And so at first when I came out with it, I thought, well, I'm just going to make a flesh tone mask, you know, and not paint it white, because I didn't have a license. I'd asked them and they said, no, we're not going to do any licensing. So I thought, well, this mask is mine.
Talk to me.
So I didn't release it saying it had anything to do with the movie or that it's from the movie or anything. I just released the mask and they sold. And then I got a little bit more onto the edge and I started doing them in a white color and doing the hair in the Captain Kirk color, but doing it, then spraying it black, just like I did. So then later, when they did the one Halloween movie, Season of the Witch was what, 4, 3? I think that was 3. They did Halloween Season of the Witch.
Yeah, that's part 3. It's 3.
Yeah, they came to me when they were making it, Deborah Hill came, and they wanted other masks. They wanted a witch, and they wanted a pumpkin. And at the time, this friend of mine named Jim Leonard was working for me, and he sculpted the witch and the pumpkin. And I said, well, I'll sculpt them for you, but I want to be able to release them as masks. They said, all right. So we went along with that, and then the movie came out, and it really wasn't successful. I mean, it became more of a cult film later.
Right, later.
Originally, it wasn't accepted because this is supposed to be Halloween, and they expected to see
Michael
Myers, and he wasn't in there. And so, I mean, they kind of shot themselves in the foot by calling it Halloween. They should have just called it Season of the Witch, for instance. Right. And now the skull was an original Don Post Studios skull, which now Universal claims they have the rights to. And if they're going to get hurt if they ever claim to have the rights to these masks, because they originally weren't theirs. They were Don Post Studios. Don Post Studios really doesn't exist right now. So it's kind of a moot point, and I'm not going to make an issue of it. But they put this combination mask together, which later on, was appreciated. At first, people, I think, were very disappointed that Michael Myers wasn't in the movie.
Yeah. So Don, these are actually our buddy Pete, and I think you've met Pete a couple times. This is from his personal collection. So he has these from his personal collection. I'm going to show you a couple other pictures later with his stuff, but he still has these in pristine condition, still with the tags directly from Don Post. So
right.
Yeah, he's super. Big Cat Pete, he's super, super classy, and I thank him so much because it was Pete who sourced your contact. So
and Pete, I've known him for a long, long time.
Yeah, he's so cool. He's a friend now. He's a friend.
I was actually gonna show you, because we have so we had Pete on here, and when we were talking about some of the original masks, I know he shared with us when we had him that those were his first original masks, and he was so obsessed with them. He loved the mask, and it was the Don Post, and that kind of is what sparked his love for your masks. And he has one of the greatest collections that I've seen, and it's just super cool for him to have. He has such a deep connection with your masks and stuff. Yeah. And in fact, look at he sent us a picture where with you and with his original Darth Vader mask, where he met up with you, and it was just, he was telling us such a cool story about it.
Yeah. Me and Pete clicked right away because he was telling me stories about how he would fly in and see you, and I was like, hey, I did the same thing when you were doing the life-size Boba Fett's and on the 3POs and the life-size stormtroopers, and I'd fly in, and I know you probably don't, you've met so many people, but at that time it was in the early 90s. But yeah, I'd go in and watch you sculpting Boba Fett's foot and doing the cast. It's the originals, it was really cool. Yeah. That's really cool stuff.
Yeah.
I don't hear you, Gabe.
I wanted to go over some of the other pictures that we have, so maybe you could kind of explain what's going on. So obviously this is your warehouse, right?
That's 8211 Lancashire Boulevard.
Nice.
Is that the Burbank studio? I'm not familiar.
This is in North Hollywood.
Okay.
Nice. And these were the original, this is from the first offering?
No, we were at Lancashire we moved into this building. We were forced into this building by the kind of volume we were doing with Star Wars.
Got it. And then
so we moved from Glendale, with 811 Milford, to 8211 Lancashire Boulevard in North Hollywood.
That's awesome. And then these are these some of the original ones that you did, or are these one of when you started doing the premium?
These are injection molded ones.
These are the injection mold ones.
And you know that as I had mentioned, that injection mold could have been better. You know, I probably went to the wrong person to make that mold, and they made the mold in a way that it could have been done better. But this is what we ended up with, and the mold was kind of leaked plastic a little bit, so we had to hand trim them and clean them up.
Wow.
And so
those are beautiful.
But they were pretty good masks, I think.
Yeah. Those are and you made so many people happy with these because again, you're the only source to get a life-size Darth Vader helmet, you know. So you pioneered, especially the stuff like I collect a lot of that stuff, so you're kind of the founder of that section.
Well, you know, it wasn't they weren't the Darth Vaders weren't original size, but you know, along with the Universal horror masks and the Planet of the Apes mask, I mean, they were the kind of things that people would walk into the studio and say, "Are these for some movie?" So, in other words, the quality was more of a movie quality, and it had a gravitas of being almost something from a film.
No.
And I think that was a lot of the charm of Don Post Studios, because we use a lot of techniques, especially with the latex masks, that are stage and film techniques.
Yeah.
With the airbrushing and the painting, hair work and all that. And so we were giving people something that they could touch that felt like it was from a movie.
But then, Don, you eventually started moving into full size, you know, whole costume, right? Whole statues.
Well, you know how that happened is for several years, I was saying to Lucasfilm, I said, I'd like to make a full-size Darth Vader. And I talked to him and talked to him and talked to him. And then all of a sudden, Rubies at one point was probably a $400 or $500 million a year company. And they got a license to do some of the Star Wars stuff. And one of the things they got is they gave them a license to do Darth Vader. And I'm calling their licensing department. What? I've been asking you to do that for years. And you said no. And so finally they said, well, I'll tell you what, we'll let you do the Stormtrooper. And so I wanted to do a Star Wars. And this one guy who worked for me, Eric Yeager, we were talking about the pose on the Stormtrooper. And I said, we wanted to have that Hall, who goes there type of pose. And so that's what we came up with. And I took one of my employees and we did a life cast of him. We put him in that position, in that shape. And we took a life cast, full body cast of him. And then over that, we overlaid all of the parts of the Stormtrooper and refined them. I mean, we worked the daylights out of it in order to make it right, because I wanted this thing. I wanted this thing to look superior. And I worked on it as hard as I could. One of the benefits of starting out with a life cast of somebody is you could set the stormtroopers up as you can the Boba Fett. And it'll stand up on its own.
Yeah.
Not a base or anything. So it's very well balanced. And so we went to Lucasfilm and I got molds. They gave me molds for all of these body parts and everything like that. The molds were not very well maintained because when you make a silicone mold, you have to have a case that goes around it to hold it in its shape. And they had no cases. They had these things just lying there, and they're getting old, and they're not holding their shape. So we had to massage these things and get them into the right shape and everything. And we cast all the parts, and then we along with sculpting techniques and everything, we put all these parts together onto this stormtrooper. And for the boots, we didn't really have the boots, so I went to a boot maker, and I had him make me a pair of the stormtrooper boots.
Wow.
Real boots. And we put that into the sculpture. And we got the gun, and
now was the gun, Don, was the gun from Lucasfilm, like you borrowed it from Lucasfilm and made a cast of it, or?
You know what? I can't remember, because I remember also doing measurements on the gun.
Mm-hmm.
Getting all these exact measurements. I think we might have had the gun too, though, but then we just built it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because you wouldn't by chance have that at your house somewhere, would you? All right, can you tell it to me?
What? Did I have what at my house?
That gun, the original prop gun. Would you by chance have it? Because
no.
I'll give you $50 for it.
Yeah, right. No, I'd want 100.
Oh man, I'd have no problem with that. 100,000.
The thing is I'm not the kind of person who collects stuff. So unlike all of you, whom I appreciate very much, I'm just not the kind of person who collects stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Don,
I'm going to move for just a second, but
you're fine.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. Man, that's just so crazy cool.
That's super cool.
Okay, I wanted to put some lighting together here. So
yeah, no problem.
There you go.
Good.
So now I want to move to these, because I know Michael has there's a very special place in his heart for this piece right here.
Yeah.
So after the Stormtrooper, was this the next full size that you went with?
So let me get to how that came about.
Yeah.
So they let me do the Stormtrooper, and I did the best job that I could possibly do. So then Lucasfilm comes to me and they said, FAO Schwartz is putting together 3 stores, and they want to do a Boba Fett, and they want to do C-3PO and R2-D2 for the store. How much would you charge in order to make 3 of each of these? And I said, you don't want to hear how much it would cost. I said, but what I'll do is for $6,000 a piece, that's like $18,000 a set.
Mm-hmm.
I said, for $18,000 a set, I'll do you 3 sets of those.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get a license to make them. And they said, oh, well, that's interesting. Okay, we'll get back to you. Well, they didn't want to do that. So they call me, like, this is 6 months before. And then 6 months later, they call me and they said, you know, we'd like to take you up on that, because they had discovered how much money it would cost to do it. I said, okay, fine. And they said, the only problem is, and this is like June now, right? They say the only problem is we need those 3 sets by September.
3 months.
Yeah. And I said, okay, I'll do it.
Wow.
Wow.
And so we got all of that in place, and we just went to town, and I went up to Lucasfilm, and I got, let's say, copies of the guns, and on this one too, I believe I had to make the shoes.
Mhm.
And we got copies of all the armor and everything like that. And
Now, Don,
we basically we had a costume.
when you made copies, just as far as the process when you're in the Lucasfilm, because by then, do they already have archives, or do they already have like a place where they're keeping all the props?
Molds. We took the molds, and for instance,
Okay.
they had just gotten in a C-3PO.
Mhm.
So I drove from Lucasfilm to my office in the Valley with R2-D2 sitting in the seat behind me.
Like
Wow.
the real R2-D2, like the one.
Full R2-D2. A guy named Don Bees is the guru, you know, of R2-D2. So had R2-D2 sitting in the seat behind me, and I had C-3PO's heads, and I had other parts, and we also measured it. I also went up there and measured everything, and came back with measurements so that we could create these. And we were able to reproduce it.
I can tell you right now, Don, I can tell you a fact that when you made these things back in, I believe it was the mid 90s, correct?
Yeah.
To date, there has been numerous license companies that have tried to, or not tried to, have Sideshows come up with 2 life-size versions of the C-3PO. And I promise you, as a professional collector, that 3PO that you guys created is hands down the best looking 3PO that's out there. And that's why it's so sought after right now.
Yeah.
Listen, I can do some stuff. But, you know, I got to say again, I want to mention some names.
I understand.
The Stormtrooper, Mike Levitri, a guy named Mike Levitri worked a lot on that. And he painfully put that thing together. We got a model for C-3PO. And I was looking for somebody who we could take a life cast off of.
Mm-hmm.
And I found this girl who was the right height, and she was very, very slender. And we took a body cast off of this girl and built the C-3PO over her. And of course, I had a copy of the head, and I had a set of the eyes, and I went to a plastics person and had them cut everything, make the eyes. and I found some guy who did a little bit of electronic work, and he put the eyes together. And I, we just worked really hard. And one of the things I wanted on this is I wanted, he has all these wires going through the midsection.
Right.
And so we actually use the actual wire,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable piece. I love it.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite pieces in my collection.
Right. And I bought a lathe to do some of the little arm parts and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the cheapest, wankiest Chinese lathe that you can imagine.
Yeah.
But it's good enough to make those parts. And I just bought it just for that purpose, and to do some of the R2D2 stuff on that too.
Don, do you remember how many of the 3POs actually were released? How many of, I know it wasn't quite as high as like the Stormtrooper and whatnot. Do you remember?
I want to say it was somewhere around 100 and some.
Wow.
And R2D2 maybe 160.
Wow.
But I mean, I didn't do a lot of the work, but I did a lot of the planning.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of the hunting around for the right materials. And Lucasfilm gave me the right paint colors.
Wow.
I was doing when I was doing I think I was doing a Darth Vader helmet.
Mm-hmm.
Lucasfilm, the people over there shared with me the colors, like the silvers and everything, which are
That's
1980s Chrysler paints.
right, the Chrysler paint. That's a big deal. So I'm part of the R2 Builders Club, and we build, the R2, and Don Bass is very involved in that, and I've learned a lot from just the pictures that he's posted and all that. And that's a big thing in that space is the color blue on the R2D2. There's so much debate that goes on. Did they use automotive blue, right? The Chrysler automotive, was it a mixture of the purple with the blue? There's just so much, so many theories.
Yeah.
So I want to show you. So look at this kid right here. That's me in the mid 90s with one of your R2s in one of your San Diego Comic-Con.
Cool.
That was my first introduction to life-size Star Wars replicas. And that's what really inspired me to really start collecting this stuff. And I was just upset after seeing that booth, Don. I'm telling you, I was obsessed with collecting Star Wars replicas. And in fact, I took a picture also with the Boba Fett, on that same booth. And after that, I was just like, one day when I grow up, I'm going to have a bunch of these life-size Star Wars things. And here I am today.
Okay. Do you have a Boba Fett?
I don't have a life-size Boba. I have a Boba Fett helmet. I have the jetpack.
Nobody has a Boba Fett.
So
Michael could tell you a story about that.
Don, you sent me
Tools that are in
say it again.
the tools that are in the pockets, like
Yeah.
body and everything like that. I got a copy of those tools, and you pull them out of there, and it's a popsicle stick on the other end.
Oh, that's funny.
That's funny.
So Don,
So I not popsicle, but those tongue depressors. They were tongue depressors, and I said, "Well, that can't be." So I looked around Boba Fett and said, "Okay, this tool here could adjust this it's on the back of the jetpack.
Yeah.
So came up with the other end of the tool, put them together. And the people at Lucasfilm must have been impressed, because in one of the Star Wars books, then they named the tools and they described the tools.
Yeah.
Oh, and they used your.
That kind of ingrains me a little bit into.
Yeah.
The
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
I'm gonna look for it and see if we could show people that. That's really cool.
So Don, I got your number 5 Boba Fett. You had told me, and you promised me. You said the first. I think you had at the time were saying, if I can remember, that the first 4 were going to go to Lucasfilm. The 5th one, you would get number 5, and I did. I got number 5, and I ran into years and years ago. I mean, I had it. It was the first one when you shipped it. I got number 5. So years later, I ran into some financial deals. So I kind of like a pawn shop. There was a gentleman that I knew that owned a comic book shop, and he gave me a loan. And what I did is I gave him the Stormtrooper and the Boba Fett, and he promised that the loan that he gave me for it, I could give him back just for the loan amount. He was super cool, dude. When the time came that I had the money to go back and buy those pieces back, somebody had come in and his son sold the Boba Fett.
Oh.
So to this day, I would do anything that there's those priceless pieces, and me and Gabe talk about this all the time. And even though it was an expensive piece at the time, that's a piece that I would do. I would love to have. I just my number 5 that you guys did for me because of the history of flying in and meeting with you and all that stuff. But I was able to get my same Stormtrooper back, because there's something about that. That was mine, and I got it back. And the Stormtrooper's in fantastic condition. And then later on, but yeah, I miss my Boba Fett.
So it's probably one of these, right? I mean, that's
if that was one of the first batches, I guarantee it is.
Yeah. So it was so much fun. And then, like I found a guy that works with leather, and I had him sew all those little pockets.
Yeah.
On there, and make the belt and everything.
That thing was badass in my living room.
To make the clothes that goes over it. I mean, it was all, for me, it was just a lot of fun and very exciting to put those things together. Now, on the Boba Fett helmet, did you ever feel the texture?
Yes.
On the helmet?
Yes.
How on places where it's chipped?
Yeah.
That it feels like it is.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
That's something that I figured out how to paint them so that they would look chipped.
Yeah.
Gabe said it perfect. I mean, you Don, we both have such a high, and actually so many people that are watching this now that are going to be watching this in the future have such a big respect for you. Mm-hmm. And Gabe said it, you pioneered, you were the one that started doing this. There's a bunch of them out there now, but you were the guy. This is where you're the one where it all started,
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, with Lucasfilm, there were so many instances where it was really there was a lot of love involved in doing it. And yet, with those things, one of my inspirations in making all those prop replicas is that I have a chance to do something that George Lucas may appreciate.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And the money that we made off those, it really wasn't that much.
Right.
It wasn't a high margin item. There was dollars there, but it wasn't a high margin item.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because what was the Stormtrooper?
$2,700.
Yeah, we were selling it for, I think, about $2,000.
Yeah, maybe Boba Fett was $2,700. So maybe you're right.
Yeah, but about $2,000, and I mean,
Yeah.
the work that goes into that.
I bet.
They sell helmets for 3,000.
Don, but
And that's more of what it's worth.
Yeah.
But also, you know, when we made those, we created a market for that kind of stuff,
Yes, you did.
and which wasn't there before.
Right.
So when you put something out there, I mean, there was no money, barely any money in this C3PO. Just like that thing is plated in nickel,
Yeah.
copper, and gold.
I remember back then sitting at your Burbank studio, you telling me about that was one of your biggest challenges was the plating and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah, I remember.
It really is, because on that you have to have fiberglass has to be so smooth, because
Mm.
if you get any sanding marks
It'll
in
pit.
fiberglass, it'll show up
Yeah.
in the final piece.
Hmm.
If you look at them, I don't think you can find any marks.
Negative.
Yeah.
The
No.
other thing, I got to give a shout out to Featherfill, which is it's a primer. It's a great primer. It's great to play it over. That's my dog.
Hey, Lassie.
So Featherfill is, I don't know whether there's anything better than that now, but it's a great uh, primer
filler primer.
for plating over. And the plating really sticks to it.
No.
So
Hey, Don, I wanted to ask you about one more mask, because I know it's also very sought after, and you know a lot of collectors are always looking for this one. So this is the Admiral Akbar mask, and this is one of the later ones, right? This is one of the last things. Is this was this casted or was it sculpted? How did you guys create this?
one of the Akbars, we actually in the Star Wars ride, they needed a Akbar that they wanted to put it up above in the ride, you know, and piece. And we actually got the mold for the original Akbar and cast, you know, used that original mold.
Okay, so yeah, so that's why these are so sought after.
That may be from the original mold, that Akbar.
So, and I know, so we have our Disney passes. So when it was open, we'd go pretty much every week, every other week. And I know exactly what you're talking about. On the top part, there's Admiral Akbar, and he's kind of controlling, you know, doing the controls as you're waiting in line on the inside. So I know exactly the Akbar. I didn't know you guys created that. That's really cool piece.
We made it. We didn't create it. We made the copies for them.
Oh,
And
you made the copy.
I've done a lot of stuff, or I did a lot of stuff for Disney, you know, that were in parades and
Oh, nice.
things like that. One time they did a Dick Tracy, when that movie Dick Tracy was out.
Yeah.
A stage play, Dick Tracy, and they needed all the characters like Flat Top and everything.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So we made those, and they were a foam rubber mask, and which I did some innovative things too, because they had to go on and off the actor really quick.
Yeah.
A lot of makeup, so I did some innovative secrets inside of that, which made it so that you can anybody could put it on and press it in the nose.
Yeah.
Basically, what I did is I took the kind of technology that we get in spray masks and other masks where it has that little piece of metal that's in the mask so it'll mold to your face.
Mm-hmm.
And put that inside the noses of those characters so an actor could put it on. He could adjust it.
Clip it in.
And that was an awesome job because those masks would only last for a week.
Mm-hmm.
And must have made 800 of those
Wow.
masks for that.
Oh, for that parade. That's awesome. I'm going to look for a picture. I'm sure there's pictures out there. So Don, just to be clear, okay, so the licenses that you had at some point, so it was the Universal Monsters, right? You had the license for those, right?
Yeah.
And then you got the license to do the Planet of the Apes, right? Yeah. And then the next license after that was Star Trek, right? You did the Star Trek.
Star Trek, and that was kind of a bust because if somebody wants to be Captain Kirk or Spock,
mm-hmm.
they want to do their face as Captain Kirk or Spock.
Yeah,
yeah.
They want to wear a mask, and it's hard to make a mask of a real human being.
Yeah.
It's got to be something that's more dynamic to make it work as a mask.
Right.
Well, Michael Myers thanks you for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, that turned out beneficial, didn't it?
Yeah, it should.
So Don, so before we move on. So then after the Star Trek, then it was Star Wars. You got the Star Wars license, and that was kind of the one that you're really. What other licenses did you work with?
Well, one thing there were some Star Wars stuff we made, and it looked really cool,
mm-hmm.
but we had to make it vinyl because it's like we were talking before. You don't want to go broke.
Yeah, it's quantity.
Yeah.
So, and we were trying to make them for a certain price point and everything,
mm-hmm.
and the sculptures are great. The masks turned out, they looked really good, but they were kind of sloppy because they were vinyl. And I wish that we could have, at that time, done injection molds on all that stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe today you could do it. Maybe today some of those characters, especially Star Wars, would be appreciated if you could do injection molds on it. As a matter of fact, I made for when they were doing one of the later movies, one of the last 3 that Lucas did, there was a character they wanted to do, and I proposed, and they wanted to make a bunch of them, and they had certain requirements. And I said, well, should make an injection mold for the character's face and have it open up because they didn't want to get the guy out of costume well on a lunch break or something like that. And finally, what they did is they animated all that stuff, did it, CGI rather than making the thing. But I found like when they were making stormtroopers for Star Wars, they were spending a lot of money making each one of those stormtrooper masks, and it would have been cheaper if they would have made an injection mold and made it right, and then it would have cost similar to what they did by having them all made individually. So, there's a lot of things I did also with Star Wars, which I wish that I could have done better. I wish I could have afforded to make a injection mold or had the time. And, but I had to balance things so that I stayed, in the green.
Right. And I think, Don, that was the key though. And I think you lasted that long because, as you mentioned, a lot of these companies that have the licenses, sometimes, they make these things as a fan, you know what I mean, as fans, and they start not realizing the cost, you know, and especially the demand once it really comes into it, and they realize, you know, there's not that much profit when it really comes down to the whole picture. And I think that's why a lot of these license holders end up going bankrupt, because they kind of, you know, they try to price it too low enough to get people in there, but then don't realize that there's this overall.
Like both of you, I have a family.
Yeah.
And I needed to support them.
That's
and then all is said and done, when you're my age, you've got to be able to have the funds to be able to retire, because I didn't have a job which afforded a pension or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I had to fend for myself.
Yeah.
And
you didn't just fend for yourself, Don. You made everybody. You've made thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people happy.
Yeah.
You know, the mass, it's a happy thing. It's fun. You know, I understand the quality, but the quality was there, buddy. It was there. It is you, Don, who paved the roads. You paved the roads, Don.
Well, then I want to point out, as far as making people happy, there's a book out. It's called Life and Rewind by a guy who was OCD named Ed Zine. He wrote this book, and he had a passion for Darth Vader and for all those characters also. And in that book, I mean, it describes his journey. But Ed's a friend now, and we talk quite often, and he's doing really well, and he's becoming a psychologist in order to help people with OCD. But, you know, so, I mean, that was a very, very beneficial thing that Star Wars did for him.
Well, Don, I mean, that, again, like Michael's saying, you literally, like, my collection and the stuff that I collect wouldn't exist without you. There's absolutely, and like I said, you inspired me, because like I showed you those pictures when I was a teenager going into that booth. Like I said, it was the first time me seeing a life-size Star Wars thing, and I was just blown away. So you definitely have inspired hundreds and thousands, if not millions, of Star Wars fans, and just in horror fans, because again, the masks themselves are just iconic. Everywhere you go, everybody knows your masks, and everybody knows the work you did. Because as a child, you know, as a kid, those are the ones you wanted. You could walk into a Halloween store and see a whole wall of your masks, and as a kid, as a young man, it was just mind-blowing to see that. So
yeah.
Well, you know, my son's in your age category and everything. And I remember in when Star Wars came out in 1977.
Yeah.
I let him take a Darth Vader mask to school for show and tell.
Yes.
And I watched him. He walked onto the playground, and there were kids all over playing before school starts and everything like that.
That's so cool.
It's like a magnet, because all of a sudden, every kid on that campus was around him.
Yeah, those are the memories, Don.
Those are. Well, speaking of memories, I have a lot of cool pictures that you shared with us, and I wanted to kind of just go through them a little bit and tell us what's going on. So this is you.
We always do kind of promo pictures once in a while, and it was during a catalog shoot and everything like that.
Yeah.
But you're having fun. That's the cool thing. You're getting in there having fun.
Right.
What about this guy? What's going on there?
Oh, R2D2. I mean, what am I saying?
E.T.
Yeah. I mean, had to figure out how to support that head so that someone could wear it and still not look like a lunch bag. You know, we were. It was interesting because it was hard to put that deal together because at the time that we were trying to put the deal together was during that Twilight Zone tragedy.
Yeah. With Vic
Yeah.
Morrow.
Yeah. And so, like, everybody from every movie studio, they weren't even coming into the office. They didn't want to be talked to or interviewed or anything. So it was hard to get all of that to come together. But finally, we got it to come together, and we were able to make that mask. And that was something that Bill Malone sculpted.
That's beautiful. It's an awesome mask. So what are we seeing here? This is how they are handmade. Those are the Darth Vader masks, right?
This is Darth Vader's, and this is at 8211 Lancashire. And as you can see, I mean, we had to put the hands in or the eyes in. The eyes are a pretty regular procedure of heat staking the eye into the mask. But also we had to trim around it because, as I told you, the mold leaked a lot. And so we just have a bunch of people standing around doing that. Not standing around, but people, I mean, they were so skilled at doing this. And these were just people that we, off the street, that we trained, people that worked for Downpost Studio.
That's awesome. So what about here? You got a picture with
Oh yeah. That
That's
was
cool.
that was a time. See, you can see that was a hat that we made. It was sculpted by a guy named Bill Bryan, he's kind of a plastics guru, and he's worked on a lot of movie props. One of the things he did was the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. But so he sculpted that for me, along with some other hats. We had a pea head and all that. But OJ really liked that, and he said at the time, and this is before, the incident and everything, of course. And he says, I got to take that home and show it to my wife, Nicole. She thinks I'm a shithead anyway.
That's funny.
And in the room with us were one guy who was a salesman and another guy who was his lawyer. And when OJ said, his lawyer stood up and faced the wall. Like, what are you telling this guy in your personal business?
Oh,
that's crazy.
That's a great story.
That is a good story.
But yeah, and OJ, I mean, what a personal guy and personable. And the lawyer and the sales guy, they had to stand around me when I was shaking hands with him. I have a pretty good size hand. It's not big, but it's it's a normal size hand. And I shook hands with him, and I felt like I was 12. That's how big his hands are. He could never fumble a football. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
And I also asked him. He was driving a Rolls Royce, and I said, "Is that from Hertz?" And he says, well, let's just say Hertz made it possible.
Yeah, that's funny.
That's awesome. So we got this one. And these are the Halloween 3 masks, right?
Well, also, if you on that OJ picture, if you look in the background there's gremlins.
I saw that.
Okay.
Oh, so you worked on that license as well, then?
With that, and was on the set of Ghostbusters, and knew some people who had worked for me who were working on Ghostbusters.
Oh wow!
Debating some of those.
Did you ever get to meet Steven Spielberg?
It was brief. Let me. I mean, because someone of my stature, they look at as just someone off the street.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know he knows who I am. That's good enough, right?
That's right. Couldn't have said it better.
And I appreciate what he can do. I and I appreciate being able to benefit from some of his creativity.
Yeah.
So, Don, these are the Halloween 3 masks we talked about.
Yes.
What do we got here? That's your dad.
Parents there. It's my mom, Louise, my dad, Don, of course.
Yeah.
And
Clark Gable.
yeah, and they were older when I was born. So but
That
they
was
were
the same with me too.
but I loved them, and it was great growing up in their home.
I know that they're very proud of you because you took the reins from the business and took it to another level. You did a good job.
I remember my dad, I was talking to him not too long before he died. And he says, you're pretty smart. And I said, before you didn't think so?
I love that plaque that's behind them.
That's something that was created. One of the puff pieces that Vern Langdon created. It was kind of a crest, monster type crest.
Your mom was beautiful.
Well, thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah, she's beautiful.
And these characters, of course, were done for a museum.
Mm.
The female looks they both look pretty realistic.
Elizabeth Taylor and Cleopatra, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot of good sculptors that worked on it. I wish I could think of their names. I know that Pat Newman worked on it, and Chris Mueller worked on it, on some of those things. And they were for a museum.
So Don, when I saw this one, I freaked out because, like I told you, I'm a big old sci-fi, the B movies. And when I saw Tor Johnson, I was like, man, he's one of my favorite characters from those, or just favorite actor from those old B movies. So when I saw this, I was like, man, this is awesome.
By the way, that's John Chambers with his back to you there.
Oh, okay.
And the interesting thing about that mask is I was going to a baseball game with my son, who was 13 at the time, in Chicago, where we were going into Kaminsky Park, where the White Sox play. And when my dad was a kid, he was a White Sox fan, and he would even skip school at times to go to White Sox games. Somewhere I've got a picture of my dad walking on the infield, taken by my grandfather, in that would be maybe 1915 or something.
Wow.
So I'm walking in with my son and saying, oh, my grandfather took my dad here, and now I'm taking my son here. So buy a ticket. It was a doubleheader because they got rained out the day before. And we're walking in the middle of the first game, my son and I, and we go through the aisle into the thing. And as soon as we get into the light, my son says, hey, Dad, your mask. And looked up on the scoreboard, and there's Tor Johnson, somebody wearing a Tor Johnson mask.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
Field of dreams. Because here I'm thinking all these things about my dad.
Yeah.
And just as we walk in there, this is happening.
That's awesome.
It was awesome. It sent chills.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I mean, that's perfect full circle kind of. That's just beautiful. Yeah.
Right.
Very cool.
So, and then It looks like you did the Rob Zombie masks later down, right?
Those are those Rob? No, maybe so. Yeah. Now that was really that successful because, as you can see, those masks would be very difficult to reproduce. But we give it a shot. There's things that you end up you give a shot, but it's not necessarily.
Right.
And this stuff too, it's not necessarily successful. And
Not that.
yeah.
What are these, Don?
There was a movie.
Those are cool.
Well, that's a full size costume. It's supposed to be a diving suit, and it was for a movie that was done by De Laurentiis. And basically, I made this thing and everything like that. And the director decided that he didn't like me, and like the diameter of the thing that you look through was supposed to be this precise measurement, kind of off by a 1/4%. Quarter of
Is
an
it like what, third scale or something? Those are pretty big.
full scale.
Yeah.
And so they fired me.
No.
And
they look pretty cool, right, Gabe? It's like, I want one. Don't you wish you could have one, Gabe?
Yeah.
But we made a very good effort, but it was a 1/4 inch off, and
they didn't like it.
Or they wanted to weigh.
Wow.
It's funny. They made the movie, and Stan Winston took over the thing, and I was at a high school reunion, and this one guy I went to high school with was the prop master on the movie, which filmed in.
Was it for The Abyss?
No, it's not. I wish I could remember the name of the movie, but anyway. And he said, everybody that worked on that movie, including Stan Winston, lost money. And the costume Stan Winston made, he made them lighter. But they tore up. They were constantly having to repair them. It was.
Wow.
And then also, it's like you're making a movie for De Laurentiis, and you're in a meeting, and you say, this cousin or something of De Laurentiis was doing it. He says, "Hey, this is my first movie in the United States. Give me a discount." And I said, "There's no discounts. This is what the price is. This is what it's going to cost." So anyway, I got fired off that movie. Probably better that I forget about it anyway.
Yeah.
I had that costume, and I gave it to Dan Roebuck.
Oh man, what about this one, Don? Is this is from Dracula or?
No, that's from Dune.
Oh, that's the Dune suit. Okay, yeah.
That's another De Laurentiis movie, and they had a lot of delays and a lot of difficulty getting everything done. And in a book, Raffaella De Laurentiis said that Don Post was the only one who delivered on time. So,
oh wow!
Wow.
So that's used on screen? That's the screen used.
Yeah. Now Bill Bryan worked a lot on putting these together, and they're made. There's the primary characters we took live casts and custom built the things for them, and then the other actors, we made them, and we figured out how to sew all that sculpture onto the piece. and then afterwards it's foam, and then it's covered with a thick latex, sprayed on, and then uh, you know that's basically how we built them, and it was a cool project to work on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really cool one.
Yeah.
What about these? I mean, I recognize these, but it looks like the warehouse and the factory is already kind of upscaling there, right? It's growing. It's a lot bigger.
That's about the same size as it was in the other things, but you're just looking at a different angle, and that's in the where I had 4 spray booths in that area.
That's awesome. And then we already looked at these. You showed us.
That's me.
That's you with the bald cap.
Yeah, at different ages.
Yeah. And then we got you here. Was this a promo picture?
Yeah, it was just a picture we put together for the heck of it.
Yeah. And then finally we got here this is probably one of the first promos for these, right?
Well, no, that was later on, and that's a picture out of a catalog. And some of the original pictures of these masks and the original photos, they were done by J. Barry Heron, a photographer, and he did a really good job. He was more famous for doing photography while jumping out of a plane and things like that.
Yeah, those are beautiful.
Yeah, those.
Barry Heron was a good photographer. These aren't the original pictures. This was taken on the back wall of 811 Milford. Pictures.
That's awesome.
That's very cool.
In that catalog that we took the roof of 811. So
thank you for sharing that. But yeah, I mean, it's just such an amazing story, that you have, and the company itself is just such an iconic company. It really is. I mean, for collectors of every genre, because you guys literally touched on every single franchise that we grew up with and that we all love, from monsters, sci-fi. I mean, you name it. You literally brought so much joy to so many.
Should really hate me because I'm just an average guy who went to school with a lot of people that were more talented than I, like Tom Selleck. And I must have had some abilities because we're here talking.
That's right.
But on the other hand, I'm just an average guy. I don't see myself as anything more than that.
Yeah.
As an artist, average to below average.
Well, let me just say real quick, I've met Danny DeVito, I've met Warren Beatty, I've met Jackie Chan, I've met Arnold Schwarzenegger, I've met Steven Spielberg, and I've met Don Post. And I can promise you that Don Post, that feeling of the giddiness, the sweaty palms. I mean, I've tried to be professional talking to you, Don, and yeah, you are a regular guy, but I want you to know that, again, you paved the roads for this industry, and whether you know it or not, it's you've and it took a crew up underneath you, just like George Lucas. It took a crew underneath him, but you did it. You and your crew did it, and you did a wonderful job. And your legacy, Don, is going to live on and on and on. So
yeah, well, my dad is the real Don Post.
Yeah,
I'm just an extension of him.
Yeah, and he'd be proud.
It's like I said in an interview one time. I said, if my dad was a plumber, I would have been a plumber.
Yeah.
I have abilities.
Yeah.
But they're very abstract.
No.
I must have abilities because you're talking to me.
Yeah, you had a great ride, Don. You had a really cool ride.
Yeah.
A lot of people would like to be on that ride.
I talk to people and they talk about somebody and say, yeah, well, I knew him. I knew that guy.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not only that, but so not only is it your artistic abilities, but the business aspect of it. I mean, you should be proud. I mean, you're a great businessman, and that's also a huge thing. You took this company and you built it up into what we know now. So
Yeah.
you don't give yourself enough credit there. That's
Yeah.
Building up the company, I used the abilities that I had.
Right.
There was a lot of searching and learning involved from a legal aspect, an accounting aspect, how to run a business aspect.
Yeah.
It was half run good and half half mayhem.
Yeah. And I get that being a self owner my whole life, just like you, Don. I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
But that's the type of business that ends up being, they're the disruptors, right? They're the businesses that are really stick out are the ones that are a little bit more chaotic, that take risks, that are doing stuff that other people are not willing to do. And I think you did that. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
you're awesome, Don.
it was a fun ride,
Yeah.
and I got to meet a lot of people and got to work with a lot of talented people and people like Bob Short and Chris Wallace, who worked for me, who won Oscars, and Bill Bryan, who did Sill and he worked with me on the Dune project, the still suits, and he did what else did he did Sill and many other things, and the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and many other things, and I got to work with him and Jim Leonard, a very talented guy who one of the big things he did in his career is he was mold maker for several special effects places. Rick Baker,
Yeah.
also the people who do the what's it, Walking Dead.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
he is just so talented. And also our dad owns the motorcycles from Easy Rider.
Yeah. That's cool.
Ah.
He's I have so much respect for him, but I have respect for so many of these artistic people.
Yeah.
I know you do.
I've been able to work with, and I've been able to get them to work for me, and I've been able to pay them. I've been able to be their boss for a while, So that's a great honor. And those guys, artistically and everything, I look at them as being way better than I am. But one thing somebody told me one time, and I kind of adapted it when I was maybe about 22 years old. And this guy, he's my age at the time, and he says, the mark of a smart person is not someone who has all the answers, but someone who knows how to find the answers. And I kind of adapted that. I said, I don't have to do everything better than anybody else. I just need to find the people that can do it better than me. I always wanted to work with people who are better than me.
For sure. I get that. Well said, man. That says it right there, Gabe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
Don, I want to thank you for hanging out with us, for spending a few hours with us and hanging out and just telling us about this great journey and this amazing company that you and your dad built. And I appreciate it so much. And like I said, your stuff has inspired me and inspired millions of other collectors and Star Wars fans. So we thank you, Michael.
Yeah, well, and I'd like to visit both of you. And
absolutely.
I'm looking forward to going out to your museum on horseback.
Yeah. He says to me, Gabe, the other day when we were talking, I was telling him that the gallery is separate from the house. He goes, let me ask you a question. He goes, do you ride a horse over to your gallery? I'm like, no, I don't. You guys think it's nothing but tumbleweeds and boots and cowboy hats and cows, But seriously, Don, I once again, you're such a super humble, cool dude that is just inspiring. And this is what this show's about, is to inspire people. And you're definitely one of the pioneers, like Gabe said. And I'd like to say thank you to your son Matt and to Big Cat Pete for sourcing us to you, getting the contact, and getting the pictures and whatnot. And heck, I would love, and I know Gabe says the same, I would love to have you back on our show sometime.
Okay, I would love it. And especially since now I've got...
you got your wife to help you.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's been so much fun.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
For sure.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
So thank you everybody for hanging out with us and watching. This episode was awesome. Again, Thank you again for Don Post for joining us. If you guys have any questions, make sure to put them on the comments, and don't forget, subscribe to our channel and look out for our next episode next Saturday. Right, Michael?
Yep, that's correct. Yep.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Don.
Thanks so much, Don. Love you, brother.
Yeah. Good deal.
Every society has its masks. And the masks that we see, especially at Halloween time, are a representation of masks of Americana. They are significant in that that masks have always been used in order to act out people's fears, fantasies, and tell a story about themselves. The masks of Europe, modern day, are clowns and old people and very happy characters. The masks of the United States, the ones that people want to buy, are very serious masks that depict monsters. And there are also characters that are larger than life type of characters. But the biggest appeal in masks in the United States is monsters. I wouldn't want to say what that has to say about America and Americans. We say we're peace-loving people, but I wonder sometimes whether that's indicated in masks that we wear. Now, of course, there's makeup, and people go on the lighter side with makeup, but in the area of masks, they're mostly bigger-than-life characters that are threatening.